the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome in. Hey, I am Chris Harris. This is the Harris Football Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. An eventful night in the NFL, which I'll get to in a few minutes, but also an eventful day in fantasy with a New York Times story about DFS and about insider trading at DraftKings and FanDuel, among others. Many of you tweeted and emailed me with your concerns since our show is sponsored by DraftKings very often, including today. And if I claim to approach this show with some semblance of integrity, can we still rightfully accept DraftKings' ad money? So let me start by saying, outside of reading a few articles, I don't want to palm myself off as an expert about what happened. My understanding is that a DraftKings employee made player ownership numbers public in a forum before a contest closed, and that employee won a bunch of money on FanDuel that same week. And that is not cool. When we talk about DFS on this podcast, we talk about market inefficiencies. Like, let's say a certain segment of the DFS players don't know Dez Bryant is injured and keep picking him. That's an inefficiency. Or players still think the Saints offense is a well-oiled deep passing machine. That's an inefficiency. But being able to pick your team knowing ownership numbers beforehand, that's really taking advantage of inefficiency. Or, you can survey where the major inefficiencies are. Like I said, not cool. So DraftKings and FanDuel had already forbidden their employees to play DFS on their own sites, and Monday's news led them to ban employees from playing on any DFS site, at least temporarily. That's a good first step, totally necessary. And I guess personally as a DraftKings player, it does make me feel better, but it opens a can of worms. I think to myself now, maybe that loophole is closed, but what other inefficiencies are there that we don't know about, or other loopholes that people are taking advantage of? Unfortunately, I'm a busy guy. You're a busy person. We're not in a position to really know that. And there's always an element of trust in something like this. There's an element of trust in just about every transaction we make online, and I, suppose there's an element of trust in just about every interaction we have with another human being. A willing suspension of disbelief. The Nigerian prince who needs my money to help his sick king, well, I don't trust him. The Red Cross, when they're helping folks in Haiti, I do trust them. And sometimes it should be noted there's a question about how well that goes. Anyway, fair to say, the DFS their company's trustability is somewhere between those 2 points, and maybe right now you're feeling they're a little more like the Nigerian prince than the Red Cross, and I get that. Personally, I now have worked with a bunch of people at DraftKings, and I find them trustworthy enough to continue to do business with them. And maybe you'll view that as craven, and maybe you'll stop listening as a result, and that's your right. All I can do is use the information that's in front of me to make decisions, and the information in front of me and the people I know at DraftKings leads me to the conclusion that DFS isn't a rigged game, that this incident was illustrative of a wildly growing industry that wasn't patrolling itself closely enough, but that nothing sinister is going on a larger scale. But of course, I don't have first-hand knowledge of the situation, so I'm choosing to trust the people I know at DraftKings. And maybe you think that's really convenient because they pay us money, and again, that's your right. Knowing what I know at the moment, I personally don't feel as though DraftKings is running a con or creating an unfair environment. If you think I'm conveniently naive, that's cool. I understand it. From my end, knowing what I know, I do still feel comfortable playing DraftKings myself every week, and for me, that's the litmus test of whether I still feel positive about DraftKings as a sponsor. And I do. So that's where I stand. I'm not going to make a speech like this or give disclaimers every time I do a DraftKings ad from now on, but I wanted to start this particular show with this few minutes of discussion so you know I'm not pretending or trying to trick you. There's going to be a DraftKings ad later in this show, and I'm quite sure a dozen trolls will tweet me and call me a poopy head. There's nothing I can do about that. You should just know that I take this stuff seriously. I try to live my work life and personal life with some semblance of integrity. And for now, this is where I've landed.
Today's kickoff.
Phew. All right, well, let's get to the stuff that you actually listened for. Not really. On today's show, film review continues from week 4. We'll figure out what lessons fantasy players can draw. We will have another song from you, the listeners, definitely not me. And then Jim McCormick, my old buddy, is going to come aboard, and we're going to talk about the Week 5 waiver wire. We're brought to you today by SeatGeek, the best way to get tickets for any sporting event, including Patriots-Cowboys this week, or how about Northwestern against Michigan in the Big House? SeatGeek does things that other online ticketing sites don't. Pulls in ticket options from hundreds of online sellers. When you shop on SeatGeek, you're seeing virtually every ticket option available for that game all on one page. They have this really cool thing. It's called Deal Score. It ranks every ticket on the market with a 1 to 100 value score, so you can easily identify the best ticket values in the building. And SeatGeek's mobile app makes the ticket buying process seamless and easy. Once you find a ticket you want to buy, 2 taps, and it's yours. So download the free SeatGeek app right now. Inside the app, enter the promo code Harris, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Every ticket purchased on SeatGeek is backed by a 100% guarantee. So download the free SeatGeek app and enter promo code Harris. So Monday night's game proved once and for all that Joique Bell is definitely the problem with the Lions' running game. Oh, wait, no. What's the exact opposite of that? Amir Abdullah got stuffed again and again, 44 yards on 15 touches. I'm not blaming any of the Lions running backs because what ails this team, what ails a lot of teams whose skill players are supposed to be good but are struggling, is the offensive line. And it's not just, these guys aren't talented enough to hold off the big bad defensive linemen. There are breakdowns all over the place. Today's linemen in the NFL are asked to do complicated things, often block or help block one guy and then get to the second level and account for this other guy, to say nothing of reacting dynamically when the defense sends someone from an unexpected angle or position. And the Lions, like the Broncos, Eagles, the Seahawks, they're just making mistakes all the time, getting confused, missing the blitzer, etc. It's not one guy, it's all guys. Seahawks had the same problem throughout this game, which is why Thomas Rawls wasn't much good either. Anyway, there's reason to be highly suspicious of Abdullah as a fantasy option, even if Bell remains out. Week 5, they get a pretty good Cardinals run defense. And what's up with Calvin Johnson? The ESPN announcing crew had it right last night. To my eyes, the Seahawks didn't do anything to adjust for Megatron's presence. They played that cover 3 they always play with Earl Thomas at the top. And yeah, there were Megatron targets where you saw Thomas coming hard in that direction, but there were also plenty of looks where Thomas stayed neutral or ducked down to cover someone in the middle of the field. And Johnson was isolated on Kerry Williams, last seen crashing and burning out of Philadelphia. You know, I don't think it's productive for me to sit here and speculate about what's going on with Johnson, that he's done at age 30, which doesn't seem likely, or he's lost separation, or Matthew Stafford doesn't trust him, or anything like that. All I want to do is neutrally report what I see on the film, and what I see here is a receiver that the defense didn't seem particularly to be afraid of, given the way they defended him. Sure, of course, when Megatron got the ball in his hands on that final, last, fateful play, he was beastly to tackle. He would have scored if Cam Chancellor hadn't popped the ball out at the last second. But in the past, anytime defenses tried to do what Seattle did, Stafford would have pumped it to Johnson mercilessly. It could be that this is also about an offensive line that can't pass protect, maybe. I'm not saying you have to sell on Megatron, but I also don't think Week 5 is necessarily a bust-out game, not against Arizona. After next week, he'll have faced 4 really good defenses in a row. What, it would be Minnesota, Denver, Seattle, Arizona? I would say if you're going to target him as a buy low, maybe you do it after next week. Okay, and today we are also sponsored by DraftKings. And you know who didn't have inside information this past week? Me! Yikes. I finished 122nd out of 150 in one of our listener contests and 139th in the other. So a whole lot of you can officially lord your superiority over me, at least for this week. But of course, that's what's fun about DraftKings. Every week is a whole new ball game. I can shrug off my defeat, pay my $3, and pick a brand new team to play against all of you again in Week 5. Congrats to Prolific85 and Oz70 for winning the 2 Harris Football groups this past week. They each won $100 for their entry, and their entry was free if they had just opened a new account. This is how I like to play DraftKings. Get a group of friends together, play in a small group, track how we're all doing over the course of the weekend. It's really fun, and it's a great challenge. And when you go to DraftKings.com and use my promo code Harris, they'll give you a free contest to try it out. That's DraftKings.com, promo code Harris.
Game Film Rewind.
Talking tape on Raiders-Bears. Tough day for Latavius Murray. Derek Carr's only interception was Murray's fault. It plopped off his pads on a screen for an easy pick. Murray dropped another little flare pass in the third quarter. Then he dropped a pitch from Carr that the Raiders decided they had seen enough, and they benched him on their final drive for Roy Halou, who subsequently performed pretty well. You know the drill. I can only tell you what I saw. I can't tell you for sure what the Raiders will do with Murray usage-wise. The hope certainly is that the kid learned his lesson and can go back to the every down work that made him such an attractive fantasy option in a world filled with platoon backs, but we'll have to see about that. Carr played well again, folks. Whereas Blake Bortles gave you that one great game and instantly regressed, Carr, he's put up 2 solid ones in a row. A couple inaccurate throws, but really no terribly poor decisions that I could see. And, you know, bad decisions were his staple all last year. And in this season's first 2 games, he gets a really good Broncos defense next week, so he's probably not a great streamer, but Carr starting to turn me around a little bit. Amari Cooper had a bad drop in the first quarter, made up for it a little later with an instant replay reviewed toe-tapping touchdown. For the Bears, boy, the next time the Raiders cover Martellus Bennett will be the first time the Raiders cover Martellus Bennett. Dude was completely open so many times in this game. Jay Cutler's return and Alshon Jeffrey's absence essentially made a number 1 wideout out of Bennett this week, and he split wide a bunch. Matt Forte got stuffed from the 1 in the second quarter and lost a fumble, and that's a bummer, but continues to look great, like one of the best backs in the league. A pretty gutsy effort by the Niners defense against the Packers, especially in the second half, getting very little support from their offense. Eddie Lacy and Aaron Rodgers, they're rarely both held in check, but the 49ers did it. Lacy had to deal with Ty Montgomery getting a few snaps at running back and a goal line carry going to John Kuhn as a misdirection play where he was lined up as the up back. But Lacy did convert a couple of big 4th downs late in the first half, which doesn't help you at all for fantasy, but, you know, keeps him looking like a pure starter to the Packers. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, going to be fine. But you want a sample tape of how not to play NFL quarterback? Submit Colin Kaepernick from the second half of this game. I don't even get on him for the decision-making as much as for the throwing accuracy. You can't repeatedly throw it over guys' heads and out of bounds on sideline routes. Even his big fourth-quarter gain to Torrey Smith should have been a touchdown, but Kaepernick underthrew it. We're talking about a 5-yard route to Garrett Selleck that's like 2 yards behind Selleck, and a wide-open red zone look to Reggie Bush while the Niners were still in the game, and it's thrown at Bush's feet. Like, what did Reggie Bush's feet do to Colin Kaepernick? Man, I mean, this guy's like the jerk. You know that movie? He hates these cans. Knowing that the guy can throw and be effective and take a team to the Super Bowl, for heaven's sake, feels like this has to be mental, doesn't it? It has to be kind of a case of the yips. I look back on the Wilson versus Kaepernick debate just a few seasons ago, and I remember coming down on the side of Kaepernick because he was so big and strong and unstoppable as a runner. And what I guess I didn't consider as the space between the ears, boy, was I ever wrong.
Film Room Surprise.
Let's talk Browns-Chargers, a game I really had no frame of reference for before I watched the tape. And man, score this one for the little guys. Duke Johnson, we're going to hear more about him later in the show, is my guess. Danny Woodhead, Travis Benjamin. I mean, Duke Johnson was a big part of the Browns' attack. First as a receiver, but on the game-tying drive late, he was the feature back. Getting those Devontae Freeman between the tackles carries. Early in the game, he actually lined up as a wideout with an empty backfield, made a crazy great over-the-shoulder touchdown catch in the end zone. He did get stuffed on the one, and he also did get nicked up earlier in the game so that Isaiah Crowell was the one who was in, and the Browns threw it to him, and he got the long catch and run that might have been Duke Johnson's had he been in the game and healthy. If you've been listening to me talk about Duke the past couple weeks, you've heard me say, if you like Amir Abdullah, you have to like this guy, except the problem was the offense. I just don't trust the Browns to move it, in a trustable way every week. And even after this game, I still feel kind of the same way. It's still Josh McCown, even though McCown played well Sunday. Will Robert Turbin come back soon? Crowell is still there. I can't see my way through to burning all my fab money for Duke, despite how nice this tape was. But, yeah, he's going to wind up figuring later in the show. Travis Benjamin, hey, I've been dubious for a month. And this was a game where he doesn't score a touchdown, but he wins me over a little bit more with some clutch, short stuff. It wasn't all just, bombs away and making one big play. There were some tough yards after the catch. I don't think he's going to score very many touchdowns the rest of the way, but I have to say, Benjamin is going to be in my top 50 receivers this week. And then Woodhead. He's Mouse Morrison, you slot back Rhapsody readers. Tough little pocket Woodhead. Set up the game-winning field goal with a run up the gut. Took a middle screen, 60-plus yards. I still prefer Melvin Gordon. You see him when he gets a crease, and he's got a different kind of burst. It happened some on Sunday, but yeah, Woodhead was the one making the big plays, and Gordon finally got a crack from the one and got stuffed. Doesn't seem to be much doubt the Chargers' backfield won't wind up being one where someone takes over as an every down player unless someone else gets hurt. Tyrod Taylor didn't play very well in Giants-Bills on Sunday. His stat line is 274 yards and a touchdown, but most of that came once the Bills were down 16-3, halfway through the third. Taylor's interception, not really his fault. Charles Clay just got out-muscled for the ball. But Taylor was a check-down machine all day, especially on third and longs, which was frustrating. He did have a long touchdown run called back by holding, but the Bills had 2 total first downs midway through the third quarter. Giants are banged up. Questionable talent on the defensive line. The fact that Taylor and Carlos Williams couldn't get anything done against the Giant defense, a little bit concerning. Percy Harvin drew a long pass interference call, but otherwise spent the day running around with his arm up as Taylor looked to Clay on drag routes again and again in the second half that the Giants seemed to refuse to cover during that sort of comeback attempt. The Giants were playing way back. For Carlos Williams, a nice touchdown catch, otherwise kind of a lot of smashing into white jerseys, and we get word on Tuesday that Williams is in the league's concussion protocol, which is pretty terrible news for fantasy owners and for the Bills because, who starts in week 5? It could be Anthony Dixon, could be Sierra Wood, it could still be Carlos Williams because we have seen guys like Ladarius Green get cleared in time the week they suffer a concussion and still come back and play. But certainly a risk element injected with Carlos Williams that we weren't planning on. It seemed like we had a fairly easy handcuff for Shady, and now that's a little bit up in the air. The Giants, they had an interesting plan offensively against that tough Bills defense. They went no huddle, but not hurry up. They were trying to trap Buffalo's defensive personnel on the field, especially when they were in their base defense without nickel or dime backs on the field. Seemed to work because Eli really had all day to throw. He was rarely hit at all. Of course, by the third quarter, the teams were like a combined 3 for 17 on third down, so you wouldn't say this was a beautiful offensive performance from the Giants either. Bills had 17 penalties for 135 yards. Kind of embarrassing. That leaked talk about Andre Williams taking over as the main back for the Giants proved to be nonsense, as Rashad Jennings was the starter, and he definitely was stuffed a bunch, but the Giants were able to stick with the run, and Jennings had a few good runs late in the game and then made the play of the game. A little sprint-out screen, and Nigel Bradham had him for a stop. Bradham had him. But Jennings avoided him. Nice little move. Sprinted down the sidelines for a touchdown. Did we learn anything about this backfield that should cause you to be excited about any of the options here? Probably not. Shane Vereen had a big middle screen called back by an illegal man downfield, but no, it's a rotation. Jennings is still the one you'd start if you had to pick someone, but hopefully you don't have to pick someone. Panthers Bucks, two of my favorite running backs, talent-wise. Doug Martin, he racked up 61 of his 106 rushing yards on a single drive, down 3 touchdowns, so I'm not quite putting him in Canton. But film don't lie, as we are apparently now trying to call the pregame video segments on Thursdays and Sundays. Film don't lie. Martin, tough, shifty, powerful, crummy team. Sometimes that gets you a 5-yard touchdown and 5 targets and 37 yards, and we'll take it. He's a low-level number 2 fantasy back, just like I always say, and no higher than that because Charles Sims plays a lot. But Martin, still very strong in the talent department. Jonathan Stewart gets his butt bailed out by Ed Dixon after Stewart fumbles, and Dixon plucks it out of midair and runs it for a touchdown. Hey, Daily Show, see that guy running into the end zone with the football? Yeah, it would be super nice if you'd do that. Like Martin, Stewart's not a full-time back, but he plays enough to be the front end of a platoon, and as such is a good enough player to be finding the end zone more, but he's stuck on 0, and it's maddening. I don't really buy this is entirely Mike Tolbert related because Stewart had 8 red zone snaps on Sunday. He's got 24 of them this year. I'm as frustrated as you are. I own Stewart in La Liga. But while Ted Ginn goes along scoring underneath route touchdowns, I guess we Daily Show owners just have to be patient and assume the worm will turn. Mike Evans, speaking of frustration, kind of expected to see that Evans was covered by the Panthers' burgeoning stud corner Josh Norman for most of the day. Nope. I thought maybe that would explain the lack of production, but nope. Norman pretty much plays sides. So that's annoying. Vincent Jackson, his production largely garbage time. Half his catches, including his touchdown, came after the game was long decided, but we would take some Mike Evans garbage time production too. Man, it's 1 week on, 1 week off right now with Evans. Frustrating. Nothing about the way he was running or his routes that I could see would make him a 17-target guy in week 3 and an 8-target guy in week 4. Maybe we just chalk it up to the rookie quarterback, but doesn't make it easier to swallow. Lastly, that Jags-Colts monstrosity. Blake Bortles played well for a half, then started throwing it wildly in the second. Matt Hasselbeck couldn't do anything down the field, couldn't hook up with T.Y. Hilton, and the running backs kept fumbling to the point where Josh Robinson, a super deep sleeper, here on the little podcast that could, whoops, Robinson was benched, and Frank Gore fumbled again inside an opponent's 5-yard line, and now the Colts are putting in a call to Ahmad Bradshaw. TJ Yeldon is a good player on a bad team, and he did what he could and then ripped off a lovely 36-yard run in overtime. He's not someone you can bench players on better teams for, probably, but I still am relatively impressed with a guy who's running for kind of a bad team. Andre Johnson, fast turning out to be maybe my best against-the-grain call of the summer, maybe him or Matt Forte. I think he's droppable pretty much all leagues, definitely 10 and 12-team leagues. My question is, can we apply anything we learned about the Indy passing game to Andrew Luck? Because if we can, Dante Moncrief now needs to be ranked higher than Hilton. For Thursday, we're not sure if we're going to see Luck. If Luck doesn't play, I can promise you Moncrief will be higher because Hasselbeck was not going down the field. As for the Jags receivers, Allen Robinson, he drew the tougher matchup against Vontae Davis, and Allen Hurns definitely benefited. That's where 11 catches comes from. And to be fair to Hurns, he hasn't failed to get to 60 yards receiving yet in a game this year. You could do worse than have him as a fill-in, though he fits the definition of feast or famine.
Harris's music digression.
And today's digression is a great one. It's from Wesley Domingos. I remember this song from the movie Drive, if you ever saw that movie with Ryan Gosling. So the song is called Night Call. I think you'll find it familiar, but the lyrics are slightly changed. Thank you, Wesley.
Guest.
And today's guest is my old friend from ESPN. He also is on Bleacher Report. You can find him on Twitter @_Jimmy McCormick. He is Jim McCormick, and I assume you are going to tell me a story about that Twitter handle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Jimmy McCormick, obviously, who just has one tweet, and it's just like, hello, Twitter world, and then that was his one introduction, and I've done the research, but I guess I'm not proprietary. I'm not a proprietary brand, so I don't know if I can.
I should mention that there was somebody who owned @Harris Football, and I communicated with him, and he was like, you can have it. What the heck? I was like, how nice is that?
That's so cool. I mean, that's rare in this age of celebrities who have to say I'm the real version of this person.
Yeah, it was really nice of him. And I said, hey, if you have fantasy teams, I'll advise you forever. And never heard back from him. So if you're listening, original owner of @Harris Football, the offer still stands. And no, I know his name, so don't anybody else tell me that you're the original owner. All right, so Jim, we're in our Tuesday mode where I've finished looking at film and now we're thinking about the waiver wire. But actually, something I've been doing before we talk waiver wire is a little bit about trade targets and trade acquisitions. I'm going to have a trade show later in the week. We're just going to talk about trades because we're kind of at that point of the...
Sounds like it's going to be in a convention center.
It is. We're going to go live to a convention center and have a trade show.
Yeah.
But for the moment, I just wanted to ask you about a couple of running backs that people are maybe tempted to sell high on and a couple who maybe you're they're tempted to buy low on.
Sure.
So Chris Johnson looks to me like, he's played pretty well 2 games in a row. Andre Ellington having a hard time getting back. Like, maybe he's convincing people that he's back to being a starting running back. Would you consider selling high right now on Chris Johnson?
Well, I mean, if we believe Bruce Arians, then everybody's going to get 15 to 20 touches next week. So, if the pie is that large, but I would look to market Chris Johnson. He's looked good. He looks like he cares. I mean, that's something that I haven't seen in a while.
Right.
He looks like he cares. Maybe this offseason helped with that, but no, I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of outcomes, I think, where you could have a very defeating kind of weekly toggle of who gets the valuable touches or who makes the meaningful plays, just because they have 3 guys who all, who the coach all seems comfortable using.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a sell situation if you can get, say, a number 2 receiver. We were talking before, and you mentioned someone like Allen Robinson. Like, that would be a neighborhood I would shop in.
Yeah, package him up for the Jordan Matthews owner, throw in something else.
Yeah. So wide receiver 2 might be a good thing to shoot for in this world where people are so desperate for running backs because there's so few of them who have viable jobs. Jeremy Hill, he wouldn't have been on the potential sell high list before week 4, but 3 touchdowns later, even though it was on 40 yards. Are you feeling like this is a sell high moment for Jeremy Hill, or is he trending upward?
Well, I mean, it's kind of amazing. If we knew that he would have 5 touchdowns through the first 4 weeks, second in the league, we'd be like, hey.
He's awesome, right on schedule.
Hill's living up to exactly what we thought. This guy's going to have 17 touchdowns. But I would hold on Hill. I still think he has a really strong share of what seems to be a really good offense. I mean, you can probably speak to better this with your tape study of how Dalton looks, but the line I know looks amazing. I mean, I was watching last week, and even yards before contact, all that stuff, all that healthy rate stuff, they're doing really well with that. So I would hold Hill. I think he's a really strong share. I know Gio's been annoying, but I don't think in the end it's going to keep him from being, I don't know, it sounds awful, Rudy Johnson.
Yeah, the point is that it's probably a good enough offense and a good enough offensive line that both guys can be number 2 fantasy backs or at least flexes. And, of course, in Gio's case, that's a pleasant surprise. And in Jeremy Hill's case, that's a downgrade from where you drafted him to be.
He's like Thomas Jones, all over it seems like.
Yeah, Marion Barber.
Yeah.
Listen, I think I'm with you, though. There's enough of a role there, and running backs who actually get work and are consistent week to week are rare enough where I think I would probably also hold on Hill. Let's do our obligatory Eagles conversation because you are the resident Harris Football Podcast Eagle fan. DeMarco Murray, I can't imagine his value could be any lower. Would you buy on him, or would you just let him sit there on the trade wires?
Well, first off, I would actually buy because I think the price is low enough because the panic is high enough. The good part is I split season tickets with one of my good friends, and we do a draft, and I got the second pick this year, so he took the Cowboys, so that wasn't fun for him. But what it also means is that I still have 4 tickets left this season, so 4 games left this season. So
you're going to see some great games.
But no, I would buy low. Just like I wouldn't buy low on Eagles season tickets, I would buy low on DeMarco Murray because I just think there's going to be enough commitment to him. Not what we would hope, as he's never going to return the price that just like we talked about Hill. He's not going to return the price that you're expecting, but it still doesn't mean he can't be a low-end RB2 or even have better weeks because it seems like Sam Bradford I know he just passed, had a good vertical game in theory, but that looked pretty Nick Folesy to me too. So I still think he's going to be throwing at the line of scrimmage. So there is still some PPR love. I think Bradford's thrown to his backs 30% of the time. So
the point here is I'm absolutely with you, and the point is that if you trade for DeMarco Murray right now, you do it with some red-hot flash in the pan, Leonard Hankerson, right? And you don't feel obligated to start DeMarco Murray until he starts showing something, whereas the poor person who spent a first-round draft choice on him has felt like,
they're pot committed.
Yeah, I feel like I got to just keep rolling him out there. I don't have anything else. So I'm with you. I mean, you want to buy real low. You're not giving.
No, don't give up anything. Don't give a Jeremy Hill for a package with DeMarco Murray. I still want, Hill still seems lined up to get 10, 12 touchdowns. So we can't say that for Murray.
Right. Okay, agree with you on that one. And how about Amir Abdullah? We've seen that Lions running game really struggle. Folks held out hope that Joique Bell would miss time, and that would be the key for Abdullah to start amassing some fantasy value. That wasn't the case on Monday night. Are you thinking about buying low on Amir Abdullah?
No, I'm thinking about avoiding in general. If I have him, I would really hope he has a nice game. I know we discussed he has a tougher matchup coming up this week.
Against Arizona,
Against Arizona, Todd Gurley's not, playing them every week. So I think the thing with Abdullah is we're going to see a defeating kind of bullpen-like share, with Zenner as doing early down stuff, as well as Riddick and
maybe Bell. Who knows? We don't know.
Exactly. So they're all going to be mixed in, really. And honestly, I'm not chasing shares of a Matt Stafford offense right now. So.
Yeah, or an offense with that offensive line. I'm completely with you. I'm not buying low on Amir Abdullah. Okay, well, like I said, there's going to be a show devoted to trades, and not a trade show yet, Jem, later in the week, so we'll talk more about strategy and players and stuff like that. For the moment, though, let's talk waiver wire for Week 5, and we've been doing counting down backwards on our lists of the best waiver ads of the week for players who are owned in fewer than a third of Yahoo leagues. It's not been a great great season so far for waiver acquisitions. When Carlos Williams has been the most scintillating ad so far, that's not very scintillating. Who's your number 5 for Week 5?
That would be Ty Montgomery. Sounds like a golfer, really, but or like a Caddyshack character.
For the putt, for the win.
Yeah. No. But he played all but one snap this past week. They really run out 3 receivers. And he's not really getting targeted very much for those routes. And kind of the same, similar profile. a 10% target rate, a 13% target rate. It's kind of like stuff we saw for Adams last year. I just think there's the potential for him to be better. And, you'd mentioned it earlier, and he's been lining up in the backfield at times. His average depth of target is really low. It's 4 or 5 yards, but I still think they're going to put the ball in his hands enough. And if you have 17 or 20% of Aaron Rodgers' targets, that's still something.
Agreed. There's no guarantee that when Devontae Adams comes back, he gets that job back. And
is he any good?
I think he's pretty good. I don't think he's worse than Ty Montgomery. I think they're both sort of okay players. I think James Jones is just an okay player, but happens to play with the best quarterback in the league right now. Montgomery getting carries doesn't hurt. He's lining up at running back, like you said. So, yeah, I think he's an honorable mention for me. My number 5 is Antonio Andrews, owned in 9% of Yahoo leagues. Listen, I don't think Ken Wisenhunt, rests on any running back this year. If his recent history tells us anything, it's that he just likes to mess around with the Titans' backfield. But for what it's worth, in Week 3, Antonio Andrews did see more snaps, ran with more power, more aggression, a little more decisiveness than Bishop Sankey has really most of his career. That Week 1 for Bishop Sankey seems like a long time ago. I'm not stretching to get Antonio Andrews, but I would say in a deep league, it's not a terrible bench ad because, potential starting running backs don't always just come along on the waiver wire.
No, he's a hilltopper, too, so.
He is Western Kentucky. Who's your number 4 this week?
That would be Ronnie Hillman.
Yes.
It'd be a lot different if he was Ronald Hillman, but he's like I said, it's a crutch argument, of course, to suggest that Kubiak, has trusted smaller, unproven backs before because, Forsett had such a great year last year. And really, we haven't seen a Forsett pop yet, like that we did, last year. This time last year, we were already starting Forsett, or it was right around now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I don't believe that this offense is the juggernaut we wanted. It's not.
That's right.
It's not going to be this amazing, leading the league in points per drive type thing. It's really actually at the bottom end of that spectrum right now. And especially in terms of TD rate and everything. So I don't know. I don't think Hillman has a ton of upside, but I think there is enough of a floor if he's really going to get 50% of the touches, or even we see this increasing role with these Geos and these Woodheads with teams going pass heavy, that if he can get 60% of the snaps almost.
Yeah, I didn't put him on this week's list mainly because I put him on last week and I talked about him a lot. I think he probably should be owned in all leagues. Not necessarily every team in every league, right? But if you've got a team that's not paying that much attention and just looking now for a running back, the argument against is the offensive line's playing pretty poorly. The argument for, though, is, even at 4-0, they may be desperate enough to just shake things up and try something different. And who knows? I don't think Ronnie Hillman's much of a between the tackles runner, but we shall see. My number 4 is Ahmad Bradshaw, owned in 2% of Yahoo leagues. Not actually on an NFL team as of this recording, but apparently visiting with the Colts. He was good with the Colts last year in a passing back kind of role behind the immortal T. Rich Balloon himself. And, listen, Frank Gore fumbling in the red zone. I don't think he's going to lose his job. I'm going to guess Josh Robinson loses his job after a lost fumble against the Jaguars. And I would say Bradshaw would slide into that role pretty well. Good pass catcher, would certainly want to see. We sort of need to disavow ourselves of our preconceived notions about some of these offenses, like the Broncos, the Saints, the Colts. These are not the offenses we fell in love with. But, if Andrew Luck gets his stuff together, if his shoulder gets better, who knows? Bradshaw could be maybe worth a play. Who's your number 3? I think we're going to start to get real similar at this point. Who's your number 3?
Yeah, it's the Hurricane run. I have Alan Hurns.
Me too. He's my number 3 also.
He's pacing for crazy numbers. He's not going to hit these, but 88, 1,208. That's kind of interesting. Just by itself, he's second in team history of Jaguars. It's such an illustrious, history of performers. But he's second only to Jimmy Smith in terms of yards per catch. I mean, he's a big play guy. He gets a high average depth of target. He's getting the ball 13.5 yards downfield, which is pretty generous for his target rate. And I don't know, he's catching enough of the balls that it seems pretty repeatable. It just what doesn't seem repeatable is the volume. He's not going to see. It's going to fluctuate a ton, and it's really, I think, whenever we see the teams really focus on Robinson, that you'll see this guy get keyed. It's almost maybe similar to like you mentioned, Hankerson.
Yeah, I think, and we're going to talk about Hankerson more in a second. Hurns is a deep threat right now in this offense, and I just mentioned him right before you came on. As a waiver ad, he probably can be owned in a lot of leagues. I'm not going to feel awesome about starting him, except maybe as a bye week fill-in, but feast or famine. I had a league where I was desperate. Alshon Jeffrey scratched. There was nothing available on the line. I went with Ted Ginn this past week. I won the game. That's the kind of thing. I would put Ted Ginn roughly in this category. Probably would take Hurns before I'd take Ginn, to be honest. But I agree with you. That's, he's going to be boom or bust, but when he booms, he's fun, and so he's worth adding. Again, we're not talking about players who are going to change your fantasy fates probably just yet. I think our number 1 and number 2 also are Miami Hurricanes.
They are.
And so you give me your number 2.
Okay, well, I've Duke Johnson.
All right, so he's my number 1. So
you're number 1. No, well, we discussed earlier that, in 2011 and 2012, I was the high school football editor at ESPN High School when that was still in operation, when they still covered preps, and. Yeah. There was this event called The Opening. It was really interesting. I went to the inaugural and the second one, and it was pretty amazing. I mean, Jerry Rice and Larry Fitzgerald were these kids, receivers coaches. Marshall Falk was the running back coach. The only strange thing was that it was Jeff Blake and Josh Freeman were the quarterbacks coaches. I'm not kidding. So that was the only kind of strange part.
And no good quarterback ever came out of that.
Yeah, I was there. I was like, man, Nike's got a great roster. I was like, but
they need some quarterbacks.
Yeah, really.
I heard there's this Andy Dalton kid coming up through the pipeline.
Yeah, I was like, I know it's illegal, but can we pay Andrew Luck? I mean, he was probably only 19 at the time, but or 18, 21. At the same time, I saw Duke Johnson play out there amongst the best high school players in the country, and against really, guys who are in the pros right now, or guys, coming into that will be pros. A lot of these guys were complete 5-stars. And he just was really the fastest guy in the field in 7-on-7s. He just made guys miss. He just created a lot of those woo plays. And I know this is all anecdotal, but I don't know. I saw him in high competition on every level. I saw it last week. He just makes guys miss in space, and it's a rare skill.
Yep, he's my number 1. Owned in about a third of Yahoo leagues. If he's available in your league, I would say try pick him up. It's not a great time yet for free agent anybody's, running backs or wide receivers. I don't think Duke Johnson completely changes your fantasy life. Mainly because, he's on the Browns. That's an offense that's going to struggle at times. Josh McCown, blah. There's Isaiah Crowell is there. You got Robert Turbin maybe coming back from injury soon. But if you like Amir Abdullah, I've said this in a bunch of different media, if you like Amir Abdullah, you like Duke Johnson. They're the same kind of player. I'm suspicious that Duke Johnson's not a 20-plus touch a game running back in the NFL because of size reasons, but that doesn't mean he can't help you as so many teams have platoons. So that means your number 1 and my number 2 is Leonard Hankerson, and I'll talk about him. I don't exactly understand what the Falcons are doing in their passing game. Roddy White is playing more snaps than Hankerson. Roddy White keeps getting catches overturned by penalty. This week it was an offensive interference on him. But since week 1, Roddy White's done nothing, and Leonard Hankerson keeps busting out. And at this point, given that he's your number 1 waiver ad, you must feel the same way. But at this point, I'm almost like I don't want to bet into the winning streak.
Yeah, you're chasing this stretch. It seems like I mean, we've seen Harry Douglas do this kind of, meaning like just become the target of appeal for like 3 or 4 weeks for Matt Ryan. Maybe it's just scheme, but it seems pretty repeatable in terms of what I'm seeing. Like, it's not like it's all dependent on big plays, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's doing a lot of the white routes, it seems. But yeah, he's not the burner it seems like he used to be. He was a 4-4 guy,
Right.
Like I saw him get caught last week. He was caught by a safety, and it didn't look like he even had a chance to burn him. Like he would have been caught by the majority of NFL secondaries. So that was kind of interesting to see. He's a little bit different of a player than I thought he'd be, but at the same time, there is value there, and it's a really good offense, especially at home. And if playing those like kind of Saints-Bucks matchups, I'm interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and he's owned in 20% of Yahoo leagues. I think it's time to start acknowledging that until we see otherwise, and I have a suspicion we might see otherwise, because it doesn't feel like Hankerson's a special player, but he's running the Roddy White routes, and he's like you said, and he's probably in flex consideration in a lot of leagues right now. So if you had a fab budget of $200 and you were thinking of adding Duke Johnson or Leonard Hankerson, like, what do you think your bid might be landing at?
Yeah, it would be like in the $35 range, and depending on my level of need. If I was planning on starting Hankerson right away, if I was hit by buys or
hit by a truck or
hit by Brandon Cooks, I would I would consider Leonard Hankerson. It all depends on need, but I would go as high as $40, like so a 20% bid. He's not, like we said, none of these guys seem like they're week winners really, but who knows? Maybe they are. Maybe they can help you. They can be that extra margin where you were, kind of had a lackluster option.
Right. You're Ted Ginning your way to a win, which
exactly.
You had no right to do. I think I agree. I think, I'm still kind of keeping my powder dry. I'm not hoping for these season-altering injuries, but we really haven't seen a bunch of them.
No.
Especially at the running back position. I mean, obviously, Dez Bryant and Tony Romo, those are big injuries, but there haven't been obvious fantasy-relevant replacements, and usually at running back there will be. Carlos Williams was the one, and of course now we're finding out Carlos Williams has this, is in the concussion protocol, so maybe even that only lasted a week. But yeah, I think I'm about in the same neighborhood with you. Not going to overspend for Duke Johnson or any of these guys. Do you have a streaming defense in mind for Week 5?
I do. I'd like to go with the New York Football Giants.
Me too. That's mine too.
Hosting Colin Kaepernick and just the wayward offense, and I'm sure cousin Josh is just really looking forward to the trash bag. Yeah. So he's really looking forward to this, and I'm sure he's going to have some ripe commentary, even if it's like a week later.
No, he'll have commentary this Friday for sure.
There you go.
I'm with you. Like, the Giants have been good 2 weeks in a row. I think 11 and 10 fantasy points the past 2 weeks, and I don't think their secondary is any good at all, and yet people keep not scoring on them. And
that's the thing. It doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, I'm going to stream them at home. I agree with you that the Giants are the ad. They're owned at 9% of Yahoo leagues. I hear from listeners sometimes when we do these waiver shows, I'm in a deeper league. I'm in more of an expert league. The players that you're mentioning are just owned in too many. And so let me run through that. You heard my 5 overall, but let me run through 5 deep league potential ads. Number 1 for me is Chris Thompson of Washington. Like, if you like the Lance Dunbar role in Dallas, that's kind of what Chris Thompson's doing. I mean, he's clearly game flow dependent, but I would say, if you thought Dan Dunbar might be useful to you, and now he has a torn ACL, you can go Chris Thompson. Next would be Willie Snead for the Saints. I don't think he does anything particularly special, but he's getting more action than Cooks, and maybe you just don't bet into that winning streak. Deep league tight end, you could look for Gary Barnidge, 30-year-old journeyman, like, I think with more production already through 4 games than he had in his entire career combined. I don't think it'll last, but, sometimes beggars can't be choosers. Stephon Diggs of the Vikings, rookie receiver out of Maryland, supposed to be really raw and not ready for the NFL, and yet Charles Johnson gets hurt, and Diggs kind of spent Sunday running Aqib Talib around all over the field. He played really well. And maybe Jamison Crowder of Washington, if Deshaun Jackson stays out, it feels like he's the biggest replacement. Any of those names stand out to you as the one you might be interested in a deep league, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's probably because I covered him in high school, but I like Stephon Diggs a lot.
Okay.
He's like he's one of those like stud speedsters that comes out of like the DMV area. They have a pretty good history of like kind of shifty playmakers. It sounds anecdotal, but there really is. It's like kind of a type of football they play. And I don't know. I think he could be a nice little PPR guy because nobody stepped up yet in that passing game. I know Mike Wallace just had an okay week, but I don't know. Maybe Teddy has a friend.
Yeah, I mean, and Charles Johnson was that friend last year, but boy, it's not so far this year. Skeptical, of course, that's right. An offense that's going to throw enough to support any receiver.
But Norv Turner.
Yeah, exactly. That is not apparently Norv's bent this year, even though every fantasy analyst other than you and I like to quote Norv Turner and then just walk away. They drop some mic drop. Norv Turner, and then you just drop the mic.
I like when it's also quoting his success with the Raiders in 2001.
Right. He always makes tight ends successful. Todd Christensen. Okay, maybe it wasn't Todd Christensen. But. All right, man. Well, Jim, this was great. Thank you so much for doing it. You're a terrific guest, and we're going to have you back soon.
Awesome.
I hope folks will follow Jim at _Jimmy McCormick. Of course, the underscore is because he underscores everything he says with the truth.
I'm just trying to get the shift button, more action,
If the shift button gets more action, see, that's the thing. Jim's family invented the shift button, so literally every single time the shift button gets pushed.
I didn't want to disclose that, but okay.
He makes 5 cents.
It's true.
And that's our show. Thank you very much for listening. As always, I continue to be humbled by your support. I hope you'll follow me on Twitter at Harris Football. You can send us email, heyharris@harrisfootball.com. I would love to have your song parody. Feel free to send it along. On tomorrow's show, I'll be talking Week 5 ranks with Pat Daugherty of Roto World. That'll be a blast. Until then, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The end theme is Tooth and Claw by OU Villain. Subscribe to the Harris Football Podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.